Okay, so this is a big module that we're going to go over today. We're going to talk about the fertility context that we're all in right now, the state of fertility, and many of us have had the experience of a grandmother or a mother or somebody in our life pressuring us to have children or just having opinions and ideas about how motherhood journeys should go, what we should be doing with our lives, things like that, when we should be having children, a whole bunch of ideas about it. And one of the things that's really challenging is that our mothers and our grandmothers were in an environment with a totally different paradigm of population on the planet, women's rights, women's so many different things are different. So we have to understand the context for fertility today and how it may be different than what they experienced, because a lot of the conditioning and patterning that we've had from growing up isn't relevant to, some of it is, but a lot of it is not relevant to what we're all experiencing right now. What this, I'm sort of at the end, toward the end of my journey, and many of you are smack in the middle of it. So have to really think about where we're at. So, our population on our planet has exploded since 1950. There's a lot of different reasons for that. And that's even with, things like birth control and stuff like that, right? But the population has exploded. We're on track for 9 billion people, almost 10 billion people by 2050. Right now we have, over 7 billion people that live on the planet. Compare that to 1950, like when grandma and maybe even your mom may have been born by then, but certainly your grandma was, and that there was less than 3 million people on the planet then. So overall, there's more people that we have. And so how does that affect things? How does that affect family sizes? How does that affect lifestyles and things like that? Very, very, very different. And if you look at, the birth rates have declined dramatically in that time. So between the 50s and, now the people on average were having 5 children in the 50s. And now it's average of, this is worldwide, now it's 2.5 is the average globally. And that's skewed by certain countries that have very, lots of births and things like that. So these birth rates are falling along with the population exploding. And also we're living longer. So we're living longer, we're living, many of us are going to be living into our 90s, maybe 100. That was a very weird thing back in the 50s. Now that's becoming more and more common. So we're living longer. Women are having children later for various reasons. Women having different types of careers, or a career and, not having careers years ago and being solely focused on the raising of the family. And now women are also having careers. And so that has caused a lot of women to have children later. And I'm in that category. And, maybe that's not even necessarily a bad thing, because if the population's exploding, then maybe that's a good thing. But is the biology, our body sort of supporting that, is really the question, because 1/3 of women over 35 who are trying to get pregnant have fertility problems. So we're in this, we're getting squeezed right now as women, with the way things have been going. And it's not just women, actually. So with men, the male sperm counts have decreased dramatically since the 70s when they started tracking it. And they've actually, these two graphs are two different analyses of the data. There's some scientists that have been studying this for a long time. There's a really incredible book that just came out about this this year called Countdown by Dr. Shanna Swan. And it shows that there's been from a 50 to a 60% decrease in sperm counts since the 70s, meaning if you had 2 million sperm in one ejaculation, you have a million sperm now. And it's still, obviously you just need one to work, right? So perhaps it's not necessarily a problem, but what this says is that the fertility, while it may have been the land of plenty, is sort of changing now. Whether that means it's, the land of less plenty, it certainly means there needs to be more intentionality and accuracy in the processes. We have to be very intentional about what we do from a fertility perspective, because things are changing. And actually, another interesting thing is that, the age at which people would start having sex as young adults, maybe teenagers, that the percentage of people has decreased in this time as well, of people who've had sex by the time they're age 18. So we're having sex later. There's a lot of data also that shows that the sexual activity has decreased. So sexual inactivity has increased between 2010 and 2018. And so people are having less sex. People are having less sex, and there's less little sperms floating around to create new beings. So it's interesting. And does that mean that we're going to have more difficulty getting pregnant for that reason? It's certainly changing the paradigm a little bit, but okay. So the way that humans are conceived in the United States, new people are conceived either through spontaneous conception, you get it on with your partner one night and get pregnant, or through assisted reproductive technologies that like in vitro fertilization or IVF, things that are done in a medically assisted environment with the help of your medical care team. So, however, that type of, assisted reproductive technologies, or ARTs, they only represent less than 2% of the infants born in the United States. I don't have the global data on this. Now, this could be like a dream for some people. Like, I could totally, get all this stuff done in the doctor's office. I could schedule it. That could be a dream for some people. Much like, booking my C-section to have my birth is a dream for some people from a convenience perspective. But there's been a lot of unknown about how safe of a practice that is. I mean, you're arresting or freezing the biological gametes, the material and the seeds that you're going to be using to create that new being. And it's been generally deemed safe, but there are some risks associated with assisted reproductive technologies, which they're trying to do more research on to determine which specific technologies are the ones that are causing this. But for example, congenital heart defects are one of the incidence of those are a little bit higher in babies who are born from IVF. So it's generally very safe. And you probably know a lot of children who've been born from IVF. I certainly do. But there are a few risks that are known about it in the medical literature. Okay, so then we've also got this situation of environmental toxins, which actually Dr. Shanna Swan's book covers quite a bit, because there's this growing body of evidence that there are microplastics and other toxins as well from the environment that are creating endocrine disruption in the body and blocking or mimicking hormones. So either increasing hormonal responses or blocking hormonal responses, and impacting the fertility. And and then there's this irony of the fact that, our ovulation kits, our tampons, our IVF test tube, like everything, our pregnancy tests, everything, you go into a hospital, everything is plastic. So the conventional health products, the medicalization of fertility involves a lot of plastic. And there's this irony that if this is true, that the microplastics are affecting the hormone functioning in bodies, and our medical system and our health system is actually contributing to that process. I find that to be a very difficult irony to sit with. The plastic problem is a big one. I personally don't believe it's just this issue of microplastics and toxins that are shifting hormonal responses. I think there's a lot of metabolic stuff going on with people, and that has to do with our relationship with food and our food systems and how they've been set up. But the bottom line, though, is that we need our bodies to be set up to detox in a safe way and in an effective way, because if our bodies are not detoxing, then we're not going to be able to get things out of us that could be causing problems for us. So in Ayurveda, there is a concept of the 4 fertility factors, and there's this beautiful kind of so these 4 fertility factors are such a great metaphor for how to cultivate fertility in a body. And there's the seed, the season, the field, and the water. And it's very self-explanatory, but I'll go into each one. What we've been talking about, for example, with like environmental toxins or the environment that we're all living in, the time that we're living in, these are a factor here. So for example, the field for the seed here, the field for the seed, the field is your uterus. That's the most direct place. That's, that's where that egg is going, that zygote is going to implant, where after the egg and the sperm come together, that is like planting a seed in the ground. So the uterus needs to be of a certain level of health and ability to withstand, and the immune response has to be healthy there in order for that to take. And timing obviously is a big factor in that. Now, the season piece of this, yes, we talked about, women having children later. We've talked about what's going on in the environment, the greater environment that we're all living in right now, whether it's, pandemic or just, global shifts taking place, the environment, climate change, all kinds of things that are affecting our field based on the season that we're in, right? Now, the season from a biological perspective is very driven by the sun, the moon, all this time of year stuff, or our internal clocks, or what we call the Ayurvedic clock. We've always called that the Ayurvedic clock, but now it's been renamed the circadian clock by modern medicine. And, these things are inherent within us. We have these things called clock genes. So going with the cycles of light and dark, these are all factors in our health. And we know that a woman's body is furthermore tied to the moon, much like the tides of the ocean are tied to the moon. So these seasonal aspects and timing are very important for these seeds, for the environment to be of a certain condition, for that seed to be cultivated and planted and grown and sprouted, and ultimately a new being created from that. And then this water aspect, the hormones, the amniotic fluid, vaginal fluid, the level of water. We came from the water. Babies are born in water. Our menstrual cycle is driven by water. It's almost like we have a tide that moves in and out of areas in our reproductive system throughout the month. And this tide carries hormones. It carries intelligence with it. It carries nourishment and love, much like your vaginal fluid allows you to lubricate that beautiful experience that you have with your partner of joining in intercourse. And this water is very, very, very important because it lubricates all great change that can take place in creation. So these are the 4 fertility factors that we look at in Ayurveda, and we try to cultivate a healthy field. We try to have the woman in place to conceive the child in the right season of whether it's time of year, time of month, all these things, because we know our bodies change even throughout the year with the seasons. Some seasons are more wet, some seasons are more dry, and that the seeds are healthy, that the organs like the ovary and man's testicles, that these are in good condition to be able to produce healthy seed. So moving on to the field, to go a little bit deeper into this, in the center is the egg or the baby, because the field is for the baby. And when we think about having a baby, we think, oh, the baby's for me, but it's really the other way around. We are for the baby. So whether we have a child or not, our body has the potential to be for a baby as women. And we can create that field for this new being to come through us into the world. And the inner ring of that is in the baby, but right around that is the uterus. If you kind of think about going out from the center, then the woman's overall body. Okay, so this going out from the center, the mom's overall body surrounding the uterus, because the condition of the entire body is going to affect what is provided for this field, for this uterus. The mom's overall body dependent on her behaviors, her health history, the environment that she lives in, the type of sleep she gets, all that stuff converges to create a certain health condition in your body, as well as things that you were born with. And then going on from there, what else influences this field? The partner, the home setup, the home relationship, the routines that are developed, the way that they treat each other, the partner's health, very subtle things, even like pheromones and all that stuff is affecting the woman that this particular being could come through. And then even further out from there, the larger field, this outer ring, right? This could go to infinity. This could go to the stars, do the stars. And, if you were an astrologer, you would talk about how the movement of the planets and the stars affect us too on a very subtle level. But the community that you live in, the environment that you're in, all of these things are in the field. Like your work, for example, is an example of one of the communities that you're part of. All of the things in your larger field, especially work, because you spend a lot of time doing that. These are all considerations and what will influence a healthy field for that new being to come through, which is when we're talking about reproduction, the biological purpose of it. So in Ayurveda, we have 7 tissue types. We have, and they all have a function, they all have a purpose, much like the reproductive system has a purpose. All these other ways that we look at the body, they all have a purpose. So for example, dhatu means tissue. So the 7 tissues, the first is your plasma, the rasa. Rasa also means taste. So it's sort of like what's created from your food to nourish you. And it represents all the sort of clear fluids of the body, the lymph, the different types of synovial fluids and things like that, that rasa that nourishes. That's the first tissue type. And the second tissue type is the blood, meaning like the red part of the blood cells that brings the energy to different parts of the body. And then the third is the muscle, the mamsa, and that is responsible for action. Even the uterus is a muscle. So that's actually like, action. There's an action there. Has layers of muscle in it, as do many channels of the body have layers of muscles in them that create different actions. So that's an important thing. Meda, which is fat has a function as well, which is protection and keeping warmth for bodies. So fat has a protection element to it. And then you have the bone inside, which is for the purpose of structure and creating structure of a body, for support, the structural support of a body. And the 6th tissue is majja. Now, Ayurveda is really interesting because it actually categorizes nervous tissue, like your brain, your central nervous system, your nerves, your neurons, all these things, along with marrow. And marrow is the stuff in the center of your bones that is where your white and red blood cells are created. It's like a gooey substance in the middle of your bones. But what they both have in common in terms of the central nervous system, the nerves and the marrow, is that majja is for the purpose of filling a space. So Maja and mind are very correlated, because mind is what fills a space and Vata is what fills a space. So this idea of Maja, when you think about, what does a nerve have in common with marrow, is that they're channels by which energy is traveling through and information is traveling through, and they're filling spaces, structural spaces in the body. Like even your skull is your brain is inside a skull, so it has something in common with marrow. Okay, so it's a little bit different than I think how conventional medicine looks at the anatomy. And then in the last tissue is the shukra and artava, so semen on the male side and the menstrual blood on the female side, those fluids. And then obviously you have the seeds that are produced within those, and they're carried through those. But these are the biological agents that belong to our bodies that we would provide for a new being. And so all these things have a purpose. These 7 tissues, they all have a purpose. And much like the reproductive, tissues, they all have a purpose. And if you contract your bicep because you do a push-up, you're going to get more muscle. If you eat more fat building foods because you need more protection, or because you're cold, or for whatever reason, you're going to end up resulting with more protection, more, even that ends up when the fat increases, oftentimes the lubrication of the body increases as well with that. So it's this idea of where your energy goes, where your attention flows, energy goes, and where energy goes, matter goes and follows it. And this is how our bodies shift in the environment. There's the environmental effects to all these different tissues, but then there's also what we do and the actions that we take that will drive how these materials and tissue types in our body are formed, how well we process our food, what we eat is going to create different types of tissues. If we eat all salty, pitta, spicy, sour foods, that's going to do something different and create different types of these tissues than eating popcorn every day and things that are drying. Those are going to create more dehydrated, rough tissues and more emaciated tissues. So these tissues are affected by all of our actions, because we want to think about, okay, we're in this environment, there's all this stuff going on, and then there's also what we do. Then these channels that go through our body, because if the environment is coming through us, right? So we've got the energy channel here at the top, we've got which is pranavaha, like the breath channel, how the breath moves through our body, the water channel, which is perhaps, what's connected to the kidneys, the filtration systems, peeing, things like that. The anavaha shrotas, which is the food channel. Think about all these little channels that exist in your body, your lymph channel, which is called rasavaha, your blood channel. And you're going to see these 7 tissue types that I pointed out before, rasavaha to shukravaha. Vaha essentially means channel. So it's the channel that the rasa goes through, the channel that the blood goes through, the channel that brings the muscle, the channel that brings the fat, the channel that brings the bone, the channel that brings the marrow and the nerve tissue, the channel that brings the male and female fluids for reproduction. These all representing different channels of the body. Then you have your urine channel, the mutravaha. You have the sweat channel. You have little sweat glands, right? And little pores where your sweat goes out of. That's your sweat channel. Then you have your purishavaha, your poop channel, your fecal channel. And then you have your mind channel, your manovaha srota. So this subtle channel that connects with information and content and things like that. So you don't have to understand these, at a deep level right now, but I wanted to present them to you in some way, because you have to think of your body as this thing that is in an environment, and things are flowing in and out of it from an environment. Things are coming in from the environment, and things are going back into the environment through these channels that you have in your body. And, we didn't talk about senses or organs of action. But it's this idea that you're in a give and take relationship. You're receiving and you're giving, receiving from and giving to the environment. And what comes in from the environment is going to affect your body, much like what goes out from your body and how it comes out is going to affect the environment. Okay, so considering all this, considering that we talked about this field, there's the 4 fertility factors, that there's this situation where in some ways we're living longer lives. So maybe that means we're healthier, but our fertility is changing because reproduction, has gotten less plentiful, the rate of reproduction has changed, and the people are living longer. So the spacing of how we do things is changing. And this is why if your grandmother, and then there's toxins and there's the medicalization piece, and people being able to do things in a lab now to help people. There's so many things changing for women now, and it can get very confusing about how you should be doing this. You have to ask yourself how you want to do it, okay? And that everything in your life, whether it's your work or your relationship, everything is affecting you, everything, on a mental level and also on a physical level. So what can you do? You want to make sure your body's properly detoxing if there are toxins in your environment. But who's to say that, there have been people born in all sorts of toxic environments, that I think about East London in the post World War II, or even before that, when you would look at the ground and there would be soot everywhere because they were burning coal. So in some ways, some areas are cleaner and more sanitized or whatever in our lives. There are different materials in our environment, in our air, in our water now. And those are changing the way our bodies respond to the environment for sure. So you want to there's always going to be insults coming in from the environment. The thing that you can do is to make sure that your body is detoxing properly, make sure that your body is, and the way that you can do that is to set up a healthy lifestyle now. Okay. So your morning routines, your evening routines, your work routines, your social lifestyle, all of these things are going to contribute to beneficial health for you. Okay. The way you set those up. Now, later, when you have a child, all these things are going to change. All your routines are going to change. But you have to live in the routine that you live in right now. So don't plan for that future right now. You want to work your life in a way that you're healthiest in the environment that you're in right now. This is what presence is. Don't think too far ahead about how you need to be in the future. Think about how you can be your best right now. And there may be a couple things you need to vision in the future. For example, like if you or your partner want to make any career shifts or things like that before you have a child, those things take some time to develop. They're very practical things. You could think ahead to things like that. But when it comes to your health, you need to rock the routine that you're in right now. And you also need to evaluate if that's not possible. You have to do your best. But if that is not possible because of different environmental factors, your job is stressful, you don't like where you live because you can't sleep at night because your neighbors are loud, whatever the reason, you want to be closer to your mother if you have a child, because you need more support in your life. But you need to really, really be loving this routine that you're in right now, because everything is going to build from here. Everything is going to build from here. And also, I just, to give hope that there are a lot of things that you can control. There are a lot of things that you have control over. There are a lot of things that you can really drive in your life and in your health. And those are the things that you need to focus on. You can't control the environment outside of you. You can try to influence it, whether it's your partner, whether it's the city you live in, whether it's your government, all these things going on in the world that can be quite challenging for us. but you focusing on you and making sure that you have these routines of health that are really relevant to the climate that you live in, the time of year that you're in, the life stage that you're in, your particular type of constitution, where your dosha dominance that you have in your body on a regular basis. These are the things that are possible to master through this study of your own body and also of Ayurveda. So when your grandma or your mom or somebody else tells you this is how you're supposed to be doing this motherhood thing or whatever, it is not relevant. The only thing that is relevant is how you feel in the environment where you live, with the people that you live with, and how that feels inside your body. That's the gauge. Okay. So